Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world, one book at a time.
So today we're diving into Walter Lewin's fantastic book, For the Love of Physics. But here's the twist. We're not just talking about physics as a subject you learn in school. We're looking at how physics education itself is this incredibly powerful system that's actually designed to fundamentally change the way you see everything.
And at the heart of this whole thing is this incredible character, Walter Lewin. He was a physicist at MIT, and let me tell you, he was anything but your typical professor.
You see, Lewin basically became an early internet star because his lectures were just pure spectacle. We're talking about a guy who would literally put his own head in the path of a giant wrecking ball just to prove a point about energy conservation. He would swing across the entire lecture hall on a massive pendulum. It was all about making these invisible forces feel real, something you could actually see and feel.
And that's really the key, right? People saw him as a classroom wizard, someone who could turn these dry, boring textbook formulas into something that felt like actual magic. But what if it's not magic at all? What if there's something else going on behind the curtain? Well, that's where things get really interesting. Because when you pull back from the one charismatic guy on stage, you start to see this whole system working in the background. A system that actually makes all that magic possible in the first place.
Yeah, it's not magic. It's a system. And it's built from some pretty surprising things. The power of a big institution, the very real economic pressures on a young academic, and even the leftover technology from past conflicts.
So let's break that down. First, you've got the institutional power, right? MIT gave him this huge global stage and all the resources you could ever need. Then there's the economic side. I mean, he actually started teaching in the Netherlands just to pay off government loans and get out of military service. And then, and this part is just wild, his groundbreaking research in X-ray astronomy totally dependent on getting his hands on some very specific, repurposed tech.
Think about that for a second. The V-2 rockets, originally designed as weapons of war, were the very things that let scientists like Lewin see the universe in a whole new way. It draws this perfectly straight, unbelievable line from warfare to scientific discovery to creating an entire field of knowledge. Amazing, right?
Okay, so this brings us to the core idea, the central metaphor for all of this. If you think about physics education as a system, it's kind of like being given a new lens for your eyes. A lens that you can adjust to bring all these invisible forces that are always around us into crystal clear focus.
So how does this system actually train your perception? Well, it starts with the institution. A place like MIT provides the authority. It creates the stage for the spectacle. Then you have the performance, those unforgettable demonstrations that make something invisible, like gravity, feel totally real and tangible. And the final step? The students don't just memorize it for a test. They absorb it. They internalize it until it becomes a whole new mental model for how the world works.
Here's a really simple way to see this in action. In our everyday lives, if you push something, it eventually just stops, right? That's our intuition. But once your perception has been trained by physics, you see something else entirely. You see that inertia wants to keep it going forever. The only reason it stops is because of these invisible forces, like friction, that are constantly acting on it. See? The focus on your lens has been adjusted. And the outcome of all this training is honestly pretty profound. It's so much more than just acing an exam. It's about walking away with a completely different way of looking at the world.
You can really feel the impact when you hear from his former students. One of them said, "I walk with a new spring in my step, and I look at life through physics-colored eyes." I mean, wow, that's not someone who just learned some equations. That's someone whose entire perception of reality has been transformed.
So, this all leads us to a really big question, maybe the central question here. Where does scientific authority really come from? You know, its power to tell us what's real.
And the book gives us a clear answer. It's not magic. It wasn't just bestowed upon us by some lone genius in a lab coat. Scientific authority is built. It's constructed, piece by piece, by these huge systems, by institutions, by money, by technology, by history.
And that is why understanding this is so crucial. Because when we don't see the complex system behind the science, when we think it's just magic or decrees from on high, that's what fuels a crisis in perception. It makes it easy to distrust the very process that builds knowledge.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a longer, audio-based analysis of this topic, see the deep dive linked in the description.
If you enjoyed this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.